Hi. Welcome to the Neuroinclusion panel for this week, Beyond the Room, Driving Real Change in Neuroinclusion. This is where we're going to be asking some of the tougher questions, and that's why we've got such a diverse panel, so that hopefully we can cover a lot more perspectives and ideas and just have a bit of a diversity of thought, which is the whole point of Neuroinclusion. I'm Ria Jackson. I am the founder of Inclusive Minds UK. I'm all about neuroinclusion. If you've listened to any of our previous panels, for me, it's about supporting everybody regardless of any specific diagnosis. It's about meeting people where they're at, putting the human back into the humanity for me. Stop being KPIs and start actually being people. So we can call that person-centric, or you can call that humanity, whatever you want to choose. For me, it's about the individual. And that's my introduction. And right next to me, although you might have a completely different order, I do have Liz Smith. So I'm going to get everyone to go. I'm going to go around the screen and I'm going to get everybody to introduce themselves, why they wanted to come on this panel. And then we'll start asking the tough questions. So Liz, are you happy to go first, my lovely?
Sure, yeah, no problem. So I'm Liz and I am a psychotherapist, supervisor, trainer, and I have a training business, and we mainly support mental health professionals to feel confident, comfortable working with neurodivergent clients, because that's often something that's not covered in the core training. I really wanted to be part of this panel because as a therapist, I love a tough question. Get asked them a lot, so it's sort of part of what I do, but I am just really interested in this discussion and to hear what people have to say. And you know, it's a mixed feeling, I think, about why this has had to be here, because you'd think that the neurodiversity space would be inclusive of everyone, and it's not always. So it's important that we ask why that's happening and what we can do.
Awesome. Matt, you're next in line for me.
Oh, and then, well, hello, I'm Matt, I'm back. I just annoy people on LinkedIn by saying things that I don't agree with. I think that's basically my thing now.
Your prerequisite.
So I only say things I disagree with.
Tagline.
I know, yeah, I need that. No. I mean, I'm a neurodiversity consultant and a speaker and trainer and everything everyone says they are. I'm just a bloke who's really passionate, who happens to have picked up a decent bit of understanding about this in 16 years, and I'm very evidence based. So I challenge people, and I think that's why this conversation is important to me, because I see an awful lot that's said as gospel and as truth that isn't. And I think that needs addressing. And the other part to it, as we discussed before we put it together, is because there's almost an exclusion of all the voices that need to be included. And if you're not part of the clique, you don't get a voice. And so that's why I'm here.
Same reason as me then. Okay, so somebody's put a chat in. What was that? I'm organising a roundtable meeting on dyspraxia and autism on Wednesday, 23rd of April. Okay, so I'll bring that up at the end, Raj, so that everyone knows about it. Okay, so next on my screen, I've got Valeria, whose name I got right, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, no, it's fine because I'm Italian.
Oh, your camera's on.
Sorry. Yeah. I added an external one because my embedded one wasn't working. So basically, thanks, Ria, for inviting me, because that's the first time I knew you, I think. And so for whoever doesn't know me, my name is Valeria. I'm an Italian expat living in the UK, and I work as a project manager in a corporate setting. And basically, my advocacy on LinkedIn is related to the late diagnosed who wants to thrive in corporate settings, because after a personal experience in which I could notice how much still biased and limited is the knowledge of neurodiversity and how to actually treat the neurodivergent employees in some of the workplaces. So I decided to advocate for this side, because there is also a lack of support for still very one size fits all kind of support for neurodivergent employees, but there is still very reductive because there's a lack of proper tailored support, and I noticed that we are not even framed as people who could succeed in mainstream environments. So my advocacy is finalized to fill this gap, and I see that there is very still like a gray area, very poor knowledge and a lot of support missing on this side.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Amit, you're next on my screen.
Hi, Amit Kali. Once upon a time, I was a deputy head teacher in secondary education, and then probably because of the ADHD, decided to quit without a plan, and then sort of wound myself into running my own business called For Working Parents, where we do a lot of work around parental inclusion, raising awareness of 21st century challenges, coaching for parents, and working with corporates to basically make the lives of working parents a lot easier so they can thrive at home and at work. My wife and I also have a chai business, which we launched last year as if things weren't busy enough, called Mixala, and we have 3 young kids to throw into that chaos as well.
So, nice calm life then, yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah, just keeping it chill. So next for me, last but by no means least, actually, it's Moena. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Apologies for being a few minutes late. So yeah, Moena, I'm like a lot of other people these days. Everybody I speak to these days seems to be a coach, trainer, advocate, ticking all those boxes. Yeah, why did I want to come today? Because broader inclusion is my bag as well, and I'm often conscious and sort of, I guess, self-conscious almost. So when I'm yapping away in spaces that I've got tons of privilege on my back, white middle class woman, cis, blah blah blah, and I'm kind of conscious of that. So I kind of want to make sure that I'm doing the work and helping to sort of raise voices from broader communities than the ones that I happen to know about. And I'm finding it really interesting at the moment that a lot of people are coming to me for coaching about things like sexuality and gender identity, and it's not something I knew about before, so I've kind of had to learn quite a lot. So I'm really interested in the sort of broader all protected characteristics that we have in the UK, 9 protected characteristics under the law. I'm interested in all of those and how all the intersections meet and so on. And also at the moment, really, with everything that's going on in the world, particularly across the pond, I did a session yesterday about how can we still make sure that neurodiversity is on the radar of people when DEI is under such fire, and it's quite dangerous, difficult time for people. So I think that's probably why I'm here, for all those kind of passionate reasons. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. To be honest, I don't think people realise how prevalent what's happened over the pond is here. I was delivering a 12-month program, and I did the final bits of it at the beginning of this week, and one of the participants on my program's just been made redundant because they decided to get rid of the DEI as a result of what was happening. So it is actually, I mean, it blows my mind to think that it's like spreading this far. Surely we've got our own minds, our own choices, but yeah, it's quite a big influence. But anyway, let's not talk about that, because otherwise we'll be there all day and we want to talk about these. So it might pop up again anyway. So I'm going to start off with the first big question, right? It's going to be quite organic, I'm sure, but I just want to get us going. So for me, I want to know who gets a seat at the table. So Matt said earlier when he was introducing himself that, and Matt and I have had, we've become quite fast friends virtually. I don't think we've ever met in 3D yet, have you? No?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Although we were both in London the other day and I meant to message you and I forgot, #ADHD. But yes, we've talked about this quite a bit actually. Who gets a seat at the table? Because if we start looking at a lot of the large events and the large things that are happening, and any of the task force, I'm not saying a particular task force, but any of the task forces that I've been aware of or seen, or programs that I've put about, it seems to be very much the same like group of people and the same voices that are being heard. Now, that's not to say that these people aren't qualified. That's not to say that these people shouldn't be having their voices heard, but how do the rest of us get that? So for me, I'd like to know, I want to examine whose voices are heard in neuroinclusion discussions, and are current initiatives diverse and representative? Because to be honest, when I was building these 3 panels, I was very acutely aware, and I've been asking this question for weeks now, and believe it or not, the last 2 panels I've been raising the same question that I am. What we're doing about marginalized groups, such as you and I have had a conversation about this, Amit, the South Asian community, the Black community, LGBTQ plus, trans. There's lots of smaller factions of individuals that aren't getting a seat or a voice, that actually there's a lot of nuances there that are completely different. I mean, in the ADHD panel on Monday, there was a lady called Sarah J, sorry, apologies, Sarah, I said the name wrong. And she gave a little anecdote, and she was saying that in her particular area, there's a lot of Jewish community. I can't remember, was it Orthodox or unorthodox, Matt? I can't remember which one she said. Unorthodox, right? So a lot of unorthodox Jewish community. And she's a clinical assessor, and part of her assessment, one of the questions is to ask if they're proud of something. But for the unorthodox Jewish community, pride is a sin. So that question won't work, because their answer is going to be, I'm not proud of anything, because pride is a sin. And it's things like that we need to be aware of when we're, when we need to be hearing these voices, because we need to know these needs. I didn't know that. I'm not religious. I mean, at the beginning of this call, before we started recording, Matt gave some little biblical anecdote, and I was like, what's that? Yes, I'm not very religious. I am technically Roman Catholic, but I'm not practicing. But yes, so I think that these are really important questions. So I've babbled a bit, so I'm going to ask the questions again. Whose voices are being heard in the neuroinclusion discussions, and are the current initiatives diverse and representative, do you think? Who's going first? I know Matt's going to hold back because he was worried from last time. Come on, Amit, help me out.
Yeah, I don't mind going first, actually. I guess as a South Asian Sikh man that wears a turban, although a bit more casual today, I think I don't see many people that look like me in this discussion, in this space. And am I trying to plug that gap? I don't know. I'm just sharing my truth. I'm just sharing my lived experience. There are lots of people in my community that would be ADHD, that would be autistic, that would be dyslexic, dyspraxic, across the spectrum. But there is a stigma in certain communities, and there is a shame in certain communities about talking about certain things. And the other thing that I found within my own community, actually, forget about talking, generically, I'm talking about within my own community, unless a disability is visible, there is almost a lack of trust or a lack of belief that disability actually exists. So most of us on this call probably are registered, officially by law, disabled based on whatever our diagnosis might be. But because because people can't see that disability, people don't believe that I really do have a disability. And the other big challenge that I found in minority communities is certain language, it's not translatable. So my mother tongue is Punjabi, for example. If I'm speaking to somebody in Punjabi about neurodiversity, that word in itself, and about, things, issues around the brain and connections and whatever it might be, it's almost impossible. Or if it's not impossible, it's probably a word that's used so infrequently in a language that I wouldn't know what that word actually is, which means translating and trying to raise awareness in certain communities becomes extra difficult. So you've got the almost refusal to accept that it's real barrier, because we can't see it. And then you've got that, okay, if I accept that it's real, what is it? And then not being able to explain what it is or how it works, because the translation isn't necessarily there. So I worry, in terms of going back to the question, I worry that people that look like me don't necessarily get a seat at the table, because I think people don't know how to offer people that look like me a seat at the table, because of language issues.
Ask.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you and I had a really good conversation about it, just because you were inquisitive, but I'm not sure that is the general consensus of people. And then when you look at some of the big shots in this kind of world, you look at ADHD Chatter and some of the sort of real kind of guys that have established positions here, they sort of look the same, they sort of share the same messages. And I worry, I don't know if this is true, I'm talking anecdotally here, but I worry if that further marginalizes and alienates people that look like me that might have neurodiverse situations, because we just feel that there's nobody that looks like us that's actually speaking to us. And that's a worry for me.
that's been a worry that's been mentioned in every panel, but by different communities. So it's a question that's been raised in every panel. I mean, I've been picked up on this before, but I've said a comment of, you've got to see it to be it to a certain extent. Representation absolutely matters. I mean, I started in this LinkedIn world and social world with a women veterans community, and obviously we're a community that's marginalized within itself for different reasons. But I think representation does matter. It might not necessarily be a case you've got to see it to be it. I mean, I personally like that phrase, but I did get picked up on it a couple of times. But I think if you're not recognizing yourself in public figures that are talking about, really important things, I think especially for younger generation, I remember being young, I was doing once, you think it didn't relate to you. Does anyone agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and it's also valid when we're talking about healthcare and mental health care in particular. There are too many people who look like me who are therapists, counsellors, and we don't do enough to make sure that the profession is accessible to people from diverse backgrounds, including class, neurodivergence, different ethnic groups, and counselling and therapy is actually quite notoriously hostile towards religion as well.
Wow, I actually didn't know that.
Can I just, sorry, Ria, I don't want to hog, but I just want to just come back on that point. For somebody like me, it doesn't matter that the space is dominated by, let's say, white kind of middle class people. That's I'm not here sort of bashing the fact that that's the case. We live in a country that is predominantly white, and that's absolutely fine. So I don't mind, for example, being the only non-white person on this panel. That's absolutely fine. There's no issue with that. I think the crucial thing is just making sure that we are reaching those different audiences and reaching those sort of diverse areas and allowing people within those communities who are willing to share their story. I will stand on whatever platform that I'm offered to share my story. If it's a tokenist gesture, I don't really care. I will stand on that platform as a token, and I will share my story, because if there's somebody that looks like me that's listening and can resonate with a bit of my story, then my job, my mission is complete. So it's not about bashing any kind of community. It's just about making sure that we are giving spaces to those that come from all sorts of different walks of life to be able to offer their story and their lived experience.
Yeah, thanks for that. I resonate and absolutely agree with that. I've had this conversation with a few people a few times now. I've met people that have refused to do work if the teams aren't diverse enough and things like that, or they want to hire somebody specifically because of the skin color or because of the neuro difference. And I personally don't agree with that. You should be hired on merit. I'd like to think that people are hiring me because I'm good for the job, not just because I tick a box. But that's not to say that we shouldn't still look to provide spaces for those people who aren't getting them, which is exactly what I did. I reached out to my network and asked, do we know anyone within different minority communities that would be willing to come on these panels? And I started sending messages out to lots of different people from different types of communities. I wasn't discriminative at all. I just wanted to make sure that the panels I put on this week were actually representing diverse voices, diverse perspectives, diverse experiences. So I think you're absolutely right. Go on, Moana.
It's not actually that hard, as you say. I mean, you just cast your net out and you ask people, and I did the same last year. I did a panel event and set one up, and you just ask around and say, I really want to include lots of different kinds of voices. That's it, and just make sure you do.
It really is that simple. And when I've been delivering like leadership courses and things like that, it all boils down to me. Be curious, ask the question to that person. Don't just make an assumption or assume or think it's hard or be scared to ask a question, because it wasn't rude. Did you feel offended in any way, Valeria and Amit, when I was getting in contact with you to make sure I had diversity?
Yeah. So I wanted to make an example. So there's a song by an Italian singer called Marco Masini. The title of the song is actually a curse word, and he mentions the hypocrisy in the music industry, and he says about himself, he says about a judge who once said, you look like a loser, you don't work for us, I'm sorry, Masini. And I see the same hypocrisy sometimes in the world of the neurodiversity advocacy, because actually the people who are the most listened are the ones who fit a certain mold. The ones who, like the author of this song, doesn't fit that mold, may look like losers, like, let's call like this, are the one who are marginalized. So I noticed that either if the mission is to include everyone, there are actually certain kinds of neurodivergent advocates and influencers, mostly well polished, mostly of a certain ethnic group, mostly of a certain gender who prevails. So whatever they say, even if this is their own perspective, and mostly on lower support needs people, are taken as gospel within the autistic and ADHD community. But it's not always like this, because, and I link with what Matt says in his posts most of the time, there is a big piece of people, a big gray area of voices which are never listened. Like, you will never see a high support needs who is an influencer. Yeah, okay, they can't speak most of, they are nonverbal most of the times, but you actually don't know what they need, what they feel, and also there are a lot of things which are pass as an empowerment, but are actually a way to sideline us even more, because a lot of people say, okay, you are neurodivergent, in my case in particular, you struggle in corporate, open a business, okay, but this completely erases the higher support needs of us, because you can open a business if you have executive functions, if you have a specific way to specific resilience, specific skills. So you say open a business, okay, but what about the higher support needs? What about people who struggle with the executive functions? What about people who have non-marketable skills? I see a lot of incoherence within our community, to be honest.
Yeah, you're basically talking about people get for me, I'm just going to be blunt, it's those who are palatable.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I've seen it as well in the world of disability. If you look at most of the people who are presenting who are in a wheelchair or who show a physical disability, they'll still be attractive if they're on television, like as in what would be a generically like stereotypical version of being palatable. I'm not saying what I'm not defining what attraction is, but I'm sure you're getting what I mean.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is what I'm pretty much saying. Pretty privilege, as it's sometimes called. Yeah, absolutely. It's like what's palatable and what is acceptable that isn't going to cause a scene. Does that, Matt? You're being really quiet. Stop it. Come in and help me out.
I'm being really quiet because you know me. I am the dynamite waiting to go off, and I'm having to measure my thoughts. That's why I just applauded pretty privilege. I'm a white male. I'm 51 years old. I can't talk about pretty privilege. I will be cancelled.
Well, look at that hair.
Yeah, I know, right? But it exists, right? Pretty privilege exists. And to go back to a lot of what's already been said, right? What the issue I see with representation is that what we get is voices that appear out of nowhere overnight, typically with a recent diagnosis, right? And with almost no fact checking, are suddenly promoted as the experts and refer to themselves as the experts, right? And then we see the content they produce. And when I speak to my friends, and bear in mind, I've been thinking about this thing called autism since 2009. When I speak to my friends and who are parents and have supported children and say, what do you make of this content? And does it relate to your experience and your kids' experience? Resoundingly, the answer is no, not even close. And actually, the word that crops up a lot is it's quite offensive. Because it minimizes, like Valeria said, it minimizes the other experiences of people who can't vocalize, who don't get given the platform, who, to use your sort of phrase, aren't palatable enough for social media or for TV or whichever. And it drives me insane Now I am your stereotypical, right, average. I know I am. I'm 5'10", I weigh 11.5 stone. I'm white, I'm British, I'm apparently middle class based on the postcode, right? I'm as average pale stale male as it gets. But I make it my business to understand as many different viewpoints as I can, to speak to as many different people. I spent 15 years working on a weekly basis in residential settings with adults and children with really, really complex and severe and challenging learning disabilities and support needs, right? So I have got the experience of seeing other people. And I look at them, like you say, and go, there is nothing speaking for you. There is nothing representing you. And I see all the books that are written at the moment, right, about autism, about ADHD, and they speak to the smallest, most generalized section of those experiences. Now, that's not to say they don't help. Same as social media and the influences. It's not to say some people at certain points don't find that useful. They do. But it doesn't talk to everyone. And there's this assumption that it does speak for everyone that's really, really problematic. And when you say, why are people not included at the table? That's why. Because the people who hold the keys to the doors that get people at the tables typically aren't comfortable with supporting the needs of others who aren't so like them.
It's interesting,
and that's
that last
what
point,
I see.
Because I just read, so I'm like you, I like research, I like evidence before I put all my stuff together, and I actually enjoy doing it. I'm a bit of a geek. I read white papers for fun. And I found some really compelling evidence, actually, and research that was done a couple of years ago in regards to leadership, and and in regards to disability inclusive leadership, which is obviously very much involves neuroinclusion and neurodiversity. And one of the things that was said on there was that a lot of managers didn't want to practice or be involved or bury their head in the sand in regards to being an inclusive leader, because they didn't feel comfortable talking about the subject. And that's literally what you've just said. It was out of their comfort zone, so therefore they weren't willing to enter it. Yeah. But that being said, right, we've talked about it. We've also mentioned, like, common pitfalls, tokenism, box ticking. One of the things we haven't said, I am a big thing at the moment. I feel like there's a lot of an echo chamber going on, everything to do with neurodiversity and neuroinclusion at this moment in time. I mean, I personally don't think we should be talking about neurodiversity, because it's here whether we like it or not. We've got no choice in that. What we should be talking about is neuroinclusion. However, that's like a personal opinion. But for me, there's a lot of repetitive conversations going on. It's just constantly about reasonable adjustments or inclusive recruitment, but there's lots of other things that people need support with, and they're often, and it's always about the workplace as well. I mean, I get asked lots of questions about, I mean, yesterday there was quite a lot of questions about education, and I know they're really prominent parts of life. You spend more time at work than you do at home, but there are also other areas like emotional and physical and mental, which I'm sure Liz can jump in on that in a moment. But we don't really seem to talk about them. And although they say that mental health, conditions often co-occur with neurodifferences, when you really look into the bones of it, there's not that much with the connection and the link in regards to it. It's always like a brief overview to say, this is why. But a lot of people, including myself, often get misdiagnosed with mental health conditions before we actually get the diagnosis of neurodifference. So what's your thoughts on that, on the repeated conversations?
Yeah, I know that, for example, a lot of ADHDs, like me, a profile of both autistic and ADHD, are misdiagnosed as bipolar, especially if they are females, because also there is still this ongoing stereotype that autism and ADHD are mostly boys' things and male things. So I know, for example, since I got my diagnosis of both autism and ADHD, a lot of late diagnosed, especially women and female at birth, that before they got a diagnosis as bipolar, always like 9 out of 10, they got bipolar probably because the way that the different neurotypes coexisting presents may have a lot of overlaps with mania and depression living together.
Yeah, one of the things that I've found in some of the research I've been doing about women veterans is that a lot of people were medically discharged as borderline personality disorder when actually they either had ADHD or menopause.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a huge crossover there, and I think, you know, that's to do with the fact that a lot of them have very similar traits. You know, I think they've just said, I think the latest thing I've read, don't quote me on this because I might be wrong, but the latest thing I've read is something about 50% of people with ADHD or autism have both.
Yeah, and if we think of
ADHD and autism. Yeah, it was only in 2013 they changed the DSM, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
they said that we could have co-occurring.
BPD as a trauma-based diagnosis, essentially, it's, you know, often I think a term that's more often used, certainly in trauma-informed services, is CPTSD or complex PTSD. And what people don't talk about is why so many neurodivergent people also have PTSD, also have complex PTSD traits, and make those links. You know, why is that? Why do so many of us have poor mental health and, you know, struggle with relationships, and where, you know, that missing piece is, it's just not being spoken about. And
exactly, yeah.
I was on a panel at Royal College of Psychiatrists just at the back of end of last year, where there was a sort of service user panel, and the same thing sort of came up, in that they don't get a voice because of their sort of, there's an identity of like, well, you're psychiatric patients, essentially. So,
but surely that's the voice you want to be listening to, because they've got the lived experience and they can actually tell you what's happening
and what it's like to use services that aren't set up for them.
Yeah,
as well. And they were really powerful in how they spoke about that.
Really blows my mind.
But you don't see them on LinkedIn.
No,
you don't. But yeah, Amit, I want to bring you in here a minute. Can I ask you a question as an ex-deputy head? Right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, when you were a teacher, and if I can say, before this was your focus as much, right? Before you knew, right? How often did you or the teachers working for you end up in the staff room, literally either scratching your heads or banging your heads, going, I do not know how I'm supposed to support all these children with all these different presenting needs, whether they were diagnosed or not, and still meet the curriculum and meet the standards and achieve all the metrics that teachers and schools have to meet? How often was that just overwhelming, exhausting, and did it feel impossible in your experience?
That conversation happened numerous times a day, forget about within a week or something, because I think for a teacher who is based in the classroom full time, who is dealing with 30 kids an hour, 5 hours a day, 30 different kids, by the way, for each of those hours, of which there might be 4 or 5 kids in that class that have a range of different needs. That teacher is expected to differentiate his or her content for that individual. That teacher is expected to differentiate his or her behavior strategies for those students. And so as a result of that, you know, schools are limited in their resources. It's public knowledge, right? Schools do not have the kind of money that they need. As a result, teachers and leaders in schools don't have the capacity that is needed to meet the needs of every single student. And so what often happens is you get into conflict with parents, because as a parent, quite rightly, you want to know that the money your child is entitled to is being spent on your child and is being spent properly. And if your child has a need, the school is catering to that need. Well, I can tell you now, the vast majority of state schools across this country cannot cater to the needs of the individual children within those schools. So the parents then have an option. Either I say, as a parent, okay, fine, do the best that you can with my child and we'll hope for the best. Or as a parent, I say, I'm going to move my kid to another school in the hope that the grass is greener. But if it's another state school, you may end up in the same situation. And so that problem is absolutely rife across education. We simply, or educators, I'm not an educator in that sense anymore, but educators simply cannot meet the needs. And, you know, I don't know why we don't say that more loudly than we do. It's just not possible.
All right.
go
So now the
first,
follow-up
Cynthia.
question is, when did you last see anyone explain it like that on LinkedIn? When did you see the reality of teaching and education presented on LinkedIn? Right. Now, I know you might, but I mean, commonly, right? When do you see it? Because I've been advocating for parents for years, and it really winds me up when I hear parents who are literally saying, my child's struggling at school, and you need to sort out their ADHD, and you need to manage their autism. And wait a minute, how much training do teachers have, NQTs, on these things? And it goes back to the same conversation in the workplace as well, right? The conversation we've got, and I'm going to shut up after this, I promise, the conversation we've got that's making a big problem worse is we've got people with, right, again, who are new to their understanding typically, and we talk about it from a point of pathology. We talk about it from a point of diagnosis, right? And then we get upset about deficit. And who Jonathan put this in the chat as well, right? What we should be asking is, what does this mean to you? What do these struggles mean to you? What do they make difficult? Because then we can look at a different model for support, whether it's in school or the workplace. It's not about having some pseudo clinical knowledge of every condition, because that's just insane and impossible, right?
Which is the message
more
that's
we
been said
do
across
that,
all three boards.
Yeah, it's true. But the more we do this, right, the more that we have this model, and this is what we are seeing, right, from the big voices, think about the pathology and think about the diagnosis, right? The more we do that, the harder it is for anyone else to support us. It just is. It makes no sense. So then when you challenge that, and everyone here I have a great deal of respect for challenging it, but when you stand up and you challenge and you say, but hold on a minute, you know, my first post for Neurodiversity Celebration Week this week, for anyone that didn't see it, was kind of a, here we go again, but can anyone tell me what's actually significantly improved since last year? In the last 12 months, what has improved, right? There's the metric we should be looking at. Great, talk about it. What's actually happening? And if not, why not? But the minute you ask those questions, you do tend to get shut down.
You've just set me up, because I want to ask these questions to this group. You've just set me up nicely there, because the next set of questions for me was, are we making any real impact? So the government task force, the corporate DEI programs, the big conferences that are meant to be leading to real change. In the short time I've been in this world, it's not been 16 years like yourself. It's been about 4 or 5, well, probably more actually, because it's since 2008 I became a teacher, and I've very much jumped into SEND very quickly, because I was an engineer by trade, and I went straight in as an engineering teacher. And I'm not lying or exaggerating, and it might just be my classes at that particular time, but I would dare say that the majority of my class, more of them had neuro differences than didn't. So I had to pick up on this very quickly, and it was my first known experience with it, I would say. I probably experienced it way before that, because I am neurodifferent myself, but it was my first contained, like in a bubble, having to deal with it experience. And I actually insulted one of my students within 5 minutes of being there, because I made a joke about the Navy, but having been RAF and his dad was Navy, that went well. So I then spent 3 months having to win him back over. I still talk to him now. He's a fantastic kid, but he probably is one of the reasons I started to embark on this world, to be fair. And I always tell him that he's a fully qualified, well, he's more qualified than me in engineering now. He's absolutely smashing life, but he had a very different kind of parent to what you've been mentioning, a parent that was telling him that he had to dumb himself down to get extra support. So that was an interesting concept to deal with in that respect. But the fact is, are our current government tasks, corporate DI programs, big conferences leading to real change? Just give me a quick answer, because I want to then ask the question afterwards, what do you think we need to do about it?
I'm going to say no. I don't think they are.
I agree. It's the easy answer, isn't it? No.
Does everybody agree?
Not. I think that's the case. I mean, I work through myself, and I work through an agency, and we go in and we kind of, it's a bit like putting Band-Aid on a gushing artery. I think it's not sustainable what we do. That's my feeling. I looked up on LinkedIn the other day, and there was something like 16,000 ADHD coaches. So there's a lot of people out there, and that's great. But who's making the change at a systemic level? There was some moves to to make, and I think we're failing kids. We are really failing kids, as everybody was talking about. A lot of the ND advocacy work is done on adults at that adult level, and it's not done for kids, and they're the ones who are falling through the gaps. So I think there was a move by disgraced MP. What was his name? He was another Matt. Sorry, Matt.
Oh, yes, Mr. Truth, Hancock.
Yes, that's the one.
The most honest man on the planet.
Yeah. So I won't say any more about him. But he was trying to put forward a bill of to get all kids screened in school, which I personally think would have been a good thing. But that's just died a death.
About that, but I don't understand politics. Matt quickly educated me.
It's just died a death. Does anybody know what's happening with that? I mean, that would be possibly a good start. And you've got programs like Oliver McGowan training, which is training across the NHS. I think there should be a law that there should be mandatory training across all industry, across all public sector, private sector, workplaces, schools, etc. And that once you've done that, bam, it's everywhere. The understanding is there.
Yeah,
that's my wave a magic wand, but that's money, isn't it?
Money, time, desire. The reason Matt Hancock's bill never got anywhere and will never get anywhere is, forgive me, and I'll come back to Amit on this, it's impossible. It's just implausible, is what it is.
Well,
but it's a PR. It's a great piece of PR, though.
It was a great piece of PR on when the government was basically on its way out, and they knew it. It was a case of, let's throw some great things out there. The next government won't be able to action, so we'll look good and they'll look bad. But politics, I mean, I was a politics teacher, so I live and breathe politics.
You have to teach me because I have no clue.
No, the issue is that, just talking about education again, the resources simply are not there. And I don't know, actually, it's almost like the NHS, isn't it? We talk about, funneling so much money into it, but it's almost as though there's no money that's enough that's going to solve the problems that we've got. And I worry in education, with the current capacity that we've got, it's just not going to solve the problems, because going back to that kind of classroom teacher who is teaching all of these kids and all of these lessons and then gets scolded for not differentiating well enough, or then gets told that not allowed to progress because they're not doing well enough. I simply think we just do not have the capacity and the resources to be able to do something like mass screening. It sounds great on paper, but it's impossible to enforce, I think.
I don't actually think it's desirable either.
Can I just interrupt 1 second? Apologies, Moena. These people are watching. We're the panelists. Everybody else that's here, they're just watching. So please don't worry. Sorry, Liz.
Oh yeah, no worries. I was just the mass screening program. I didn't actually agree that was necessarily going to solve any problems. For two reasons. Firstly, because screening is not necessarily an effective tool, and it depends how you screen, how well that's done, who does it. Who are we going to give that task to, or is it going to be kind of automated? Is it, how it's done? And are we using clinically validated tools? Because there's a big problem at the moment with tools making their way into the NHS that are not in any way clinically validated and are still being used in sort of assessment and diagnostic services. And I believe that's misleading. And also, what are we going to do with those screening results if there's nothing in the assessment diagnosis? People are waiting years. So if we can't actually take that forward and do anything meaningful with it, what are we doing it for? If it's gonna, okay, maybe, if we can have a more non-clinical conversation about what does this child need, then that's going to be, potentially useful if we've got the resources and the space, as Amit says. But if we're just going to label the child and locate the difficulty within them without looking at the systems, the environments around them, the people around them, and we're not going to provide any therapeutic input, we're not going to support the family, and we're just going to give the kid a label, what good is that going to do for anybody? Because a label, I'm not anti-diagnosis, I've got 3 diagnoses myself, and I found it helpful. I'm certainly not anti, but if it doesn't come with meaningful support, it is meaningless.
I'm in your camp though. I'm not anti-diagnosis. It was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. However, I am holding back and getting one from a little girl, and the apple definitely hasn't fell far from the tree. Number one, because I don't think she's emotionally intelligent enough to understand what that means. And it would end up maybe possibly knowing my child and what her personality is and how she likes to get her own way could possibly be weaponized and utilized in the wrong way. So I want her to be more emotionally intelligent before she gets that. But secondly, one thing I will say is schools they're not where they need to be, but they're definitely, especially my daughter's school, they're definitely getting better, because she was in play therapy yesterday and she's got no diagnosis because she's having big emotional feelings and I needed support. So the things, I agree with you. It needs to be, about that person, not about the diagnosis, because our clinical threshold at the moment, and you can probably back me up on this because I'm not an assessor, but our clinical assessment at the moment is quite limited. So say, I'm going to be really crude, but say you needed to get like 20 tick boxes to meet a certain criteria for different neurodifferences, and they're often co-occurring. So you've got I don't know, some guy called Jeff over there that's you need 20 of these support to show 20 of these support things to get this ticket. He's showing 18 in one, 16 in another, 15 in another, 12 in another. Don't get no golden ticket. So he's thrown on a scrap heap, but yet he's just shown all those areas of support that he needs. Yet he's not being given anything because he doesn't meet protected characteristic. He doesn't get a golden ticket. And I think those people are often in a much more difficult position than those of us who have got a golden ticket.
Can I just on what Liz was saying? I think that I completely agree with that, actually, because if you're going to have the screening and you get dozens and dozens, maybe even in the hundreds, depending on the size of the school, of diagnoses, what then? What do you do with those diagnoses? Schools are not going to be able to fund the kind of intervention that's going to be needed. And that takes me back to the very first question, which is who gets a seat at the table. We're going to end up with schools in middle class, well-to-do areas that might have a bit more access to money, or have parents that are willing to sort of put donations in and things like that, who are able to get the relevant support for the children. But you look at inner city schools. I mean, I was a deputy head at an inner city school in East London, and it was in many ways the typical inner city school that you can probably imagine in your head. You think Waterloo Road on steroids. It had so many challenges, and I can't think that, I can imagine how many students we would have had that would have got a diagnosis, but goodness me, we would be in no position whatsoever to be able to provide the actual support, because the support for those students wouldn't just be about the diagnosis itself. It would be the entire holistic issue that student is going through, whether they come from poverty, whether they come from single parent homes where there's struggles, whether they come from abusive backgrounds, whatever it might be. We had all of that. So, if we're going to start screening and talking about all of this, then it goes back to that question of who gets a seat at the table. And lo and behold, those in working class, poverty-stricken, difficult areas will yet again not get a seat at the table, when actually in some ways they're the ones that need the seat at the table the most.
Absolutely. Now, I'm conscious that we've only got about 6 minutes left, so I want to ask that final question. And what I'm going to do is to make sure that everyone gets a voice, because there's been a couple of people that's been quiet, and some of that's because I'm quite passionate and I'm sure. But I want to ask the question: how do those of us who aren't in the in crowd, which I don't want to be rude, but I would say that it's probably the people in this room, because I've not seen any of us on BBC or on the stage anywhere. If you have been, I apologise, but I haven't seen you otherwise. And if you have, I'll have your autograph. I'm only joking. But how do those of us who are not in the in crowd, how can we still push and drive meaningful impact? Because we ain't going to break into that barrier. We ain't going to break through that. We're not going to get through the nepotism. We're not going to get through the systemic things that we've already talked about. So how do we do it? How are we going to change that? And Matt is biting his hand to go on.
I'll let everyone else go.
Go on, Moana, you go first.
Don't know. I mean, maybe it's accepting that we do what we can do in the small kind of corner of the world that we work in. Maybe it's part of that. And you never know what small actions, flapping a butterfly wings has a big impact, kind of thing. You never know. People come back to me after what I think is some fairly simple coaching, and they say it's changed their lives profoundly or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe not everybody wants to be on the BBC.
I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean that we go on the BBC. I mean, all I'm asking is, how do we drive meaningful impact?
Yeah, I think some of us are probably happy not being center stage and just doing what we're doing. I'm fairly happy being there.
But is that enough? That's the question I'm asking. Is that enough? Because we are where we are right now, and we've got, like Matt said earlier, big voices having big stages to try and put messages out that aren't necessarily correct, which means that we're constantly unpicking and unthreading incorrect stuff, which obviously sets us back on what we're actually trying to do. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well,
Was that good English?
Can I caveat that statement though? And I want to be really clear on this.
Was that good English?
And this is something I was taught by somebody I run a podcast with and reminded of, right? 2009, when my eldest son was diagnosed with autism, right? And 10 and 11. When I started to talk about this to other parents, if I really honestly think back now, right? Some of the things I said and I thought I knew about what autism was, what autism meant, horrify me now. I would never say them. I know that they're wrong. Now, does it therefore make my skin prickle when I hear people billing themselves as experts saying those things now? Yes. But what I now do is step back and go, but that expert is at the start of their journey as well. And the people listening to them are at the start of their journeys as well. So all I do is take a deep breath and go, I hope that in a number of years, everyone will realize that's not quite right. And that's maybe not quite the facts. And maybe that's not based in evidence, right? But if it helps them at that point to think those things or say those things, who am I to call them on it, right? There's an element of that. And I'm with Moena on this. Some people don't want the center stages to write the books, to do the everything. They just want to feel like, and I'll go back to what you said that's really important. Do the work that you might think is just you doing your really good work that for someone else is life-changing, right? That is impact enough. And that doesn't need to be splashed all over social media. That just needs to be something that you know and the person knows. My only thing, and then I will shut up, is to say this. The reputation I've got for being annoying and divisive and difficult is because I challenge things that are repeated often that either have made no difference, have very little evidence, or just don't help, right? Now, people don't like me doing that because very often there are no answers, right? They don't have the answers, whereas I'm willing to provide the answers, yes? So you mentioned reasonable adjustments. If I see another list of generic reasonable adjustments that apparently will work for everyone in the workplace, I shall scream and scream and scream and scream because they don't. But Jonathan mentioned this and other people have said this. If you want to know what helps, you need to understand what being neurodivergent, whatever that is, means to that person. That's it. That's the only person that can tell you what it means and can lead you to what support they need, whether it's in school, the workplace, or anywhere else, is to talk to them rather than go, oh, well, I saw this in a book, therefore it must be true.
There's quite a few comments.
The world doesn't work like that.
There's quite a few comments coming up in the chat. I mean, I started it off with, for me personally, it's all about collectivism, coming together. Everybody's allowed their own journey and we're all allowed to learn and make mistakes. I absolutely agree with what you said, but I also am an educator at heart. So for me, if there's an opportunity where we can educate the right people early on so they're not making the same mistakes we are, surely that's better, because if we continue to do the same thing over and over again, isn't it Einstein that said that's insanity? But yeah, so someone's put, we can only gently step in and help the newer kids to hear the other side if they say something wrong, cross, naive. Absolutely. I'm not saying go in and bulldoze them, but if we collectively came together and shared all our experiences and our understanding, I think it would be, beneficial to everyone. Because I mean, I've learned something new in this call, from quite a few of you. And then we've got Valeria's asked for it from the other side of the coin. I like this. She's put, and instead, how the less palatable it was. I wish I hadn't said that now because I don't mean it. I was just trying to frame it. I don't think anyone's not palatable. I was trying to explain what I was saying.
Explain what I meant. The
no, I know exactly what you meant. I was just making a joke.
Mold for the social media, but they actually wish to be more at the center because, of course, whoever doesn't fit that image in particular, I'm talking also about people of other ethnicities, whatever, how can they have more opportunities? Because we clearly don't have the same opportunities as the more visible people to have this impact, because a lot of those influencers I was referring to, they went to the BBC, they went to the parliament and so on. How the less representative of us can ensure to have exactly the same opportunity if they want to be more at the center to make their impact bigger? This is what I meant.
For me, I think it's about collectivism. I think the more of us that come together, the more of us that stronger together. And I know it's really cheesy, but it's true. If we all actually come together and share our experiences, we can prove that point that Jonathan said. We're not all the same. But we can share our experiences and our voices will get bigger and louder. But I mean, that's a personal thing. What does anyone else think? We're probably gonna have to round up in a minute because we are starting to get to the end. But I have really enjoyed this conversation. Go on. Who wants to go next? Who wants to round up? Moana, do you want to round up? In fact, I chose you last time. I feel like I'm picking on you. I'm sorry.
No, I'd love to. I just wanted to say thank you. I like hearing voices who are challenging and say things that I agree with and don't agree with, and I really value that. So just thank you very much to everybody.
I really appreciate your input. Thank you for coming. Liz, you're going to go in a minute, so do you want to do yours, my lovely?
Drop off. But yeah, thank you so much. It's been lovely meeting everyone, hearing lots of different perspectives. That's what this is and should be about. And I guess in answer to your question about how do we actually cope with this, I found that actually limiting my exposure is not a bad way to go. That, you know, you can only challenge one thing at a time, and if you're constantly being faced with a stream of it, do one thing and do one thing well.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's really good. I'm probably going to steal that as my clip.
And yeah, if anyone, I've left my contact details if anyone wants to connect. And yeah, thank you, and hopefully see you again.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Amit, do you want to do your roundup?
Yeah, I think it's been a great chat. Actually, I think it's been good to have a seat at the table. From my point of view, it's been good to have my kind of voice and my story and my lived experience heard. You know, it's been good to sort of explain the cultural differences and the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all approach, as has been mentioned already, to solving this problem. And as a result of that, I think more of us do need to continue speaking on our lived experiences, no matter how small that platform might be. Because if, as I said earlier, if one person hears your story and resonates with it and takes action because of it, then that's a positive impact that you've had. So I will continue sharing my story until I get onto the BBC. But until then, I will continue sharing my story far and wide.
You're Valeria, can have your own show.
Yeah. If it was possible, I would be happy.
As long